Okay. Okay, so we'll start with the homage to the Buddha first. Okay. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, good morning, everybody, and sorry for the delay in getting started. Yeah, before we start the actual class today, I just want to pay homage to a friend of mine who passed away in Sri Lanka just exactly a week ago. He was I would say, one of the great Western monks of our time, though not known to the general public. He was of French birth, but he grew up in Denmark, and he became a monk in the year 1968 and lived in Sri Lanka as a monk for over 50 years, most of the time, almost all the time, in fact, in silent seclusion deep in the forests. His name was Venerable Nyana Deepa, and he had a brilliant mind. He had learned Pali very, very well. He had a very, very deep, clear understanding of the Dharma, and he had memorized many, many texts, particularly the verse passages from the suttas. And he would always prefer to live deep in seclusion, and he attracted a number of other monks, not to live with him, because he didn't want to live with other people, but to also go out into the forests, the deep forests of Sri Lanka, and live in secluded places in the forests. And so last week he passed away. He's just a few weeks older than myself, so he was at the age of 75, but he had had cancer for several years, and then he passed away. And already there is a Facebook page established and dedicated to his memory, and I shared the link with everybody, so you can look it up on your own. And so I pay homage to him. He's one of the Western monks in Sri Lanka for whom I had the greatest respect and reverence and admiration. Okay, so let me go back now to the ordeal of trying to... Am I spotlighted?
You should be, unless you have canceled it.
No, I didn't. And now I'm going to share the screen. Okay, do you see me in the spotlight?
Yes.
Okay. And you see me alone, not the group of people?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so now we're coming back now to the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Fours. And we start with sutta number 77, and I want to go through a few suttas this morning, because these are short suttas, some of them a little controversial. Okay, so the first of these is called Inconceivable Matters. And so this sutta, the Buddha mentions, he says that the text mentions that there are these 4 inconceivable matters that one should not try to conceive. In other words, to figure them out intellectually. The Pali word used is achinteya. Okay, so what are these 4 matters? Then he continues, if you try to figure them out intellectually, then you might reap either madness or frustration. Okay, so what are these four? Okay, so the first of these is said to be the domain of the Buddhas. This is, in Pali, the word is Buddha Visaya. So this is an inconceivable matter that you can't figure out intellectually. And it seems that this maybe statement is indicative of a tendency now to elevate or to exalt the Buddha above all other beings. And so we find that an example of this it's a passage that occurs in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, but also in the Samyutta Nikaya, the shorter version in the Samyutta Nikaya. It is in the Satipatthana Samyutta, that's chapter number 47, and it's sutta number 12, where the Venerable Sariputta comes to the Buddha, and he says that he has so much confidence in the Buddha that he believes that there has never been another ascetic or Brahmin with greater wisdom or greater direct knowledge, greater enlightenment than the Buddha himself. And then the Buddha, rather than simply accept this praise, he challenges Sariputta and says, first, have you known the minds of all of the Buddhas of the past and known that those Buddhas of the past had such virtuous conduct, such samadhi power, such wisdom, and such liberation? And Sariputta says, no. Then the Buddha says, have you encompassed with your own mind the minds of all of the Buddhas of the future and known that all of those Buddhas to come in the future will have such virtuous conduct, such samadhi, such wisdom, such liberation? Sariputta says, no. Then the Buddha says, have you penetrated my mind with your mind such that you know that I, the present Buddha, have such virtuous conduct, such power of samadhi, such wisdom, such liberation? And again, Sariputta says, no. And so then the Buddha says, then in this case, you don't have direct knowledge of the outstanding qualities of the Buddhas of the past, future, and present. Yeah, so we see here that a kind of, maybe this is indicative of a tendency to start to exalt the Buddha above that of all of the other, even of the foremost of the Arahat disciples, Sariputta. And then this tendency, we could see it manifesting in the claim that the Buddha has 10 special powers of knowledge that are almost unique to himself, including the ability to know what is impossible and what is possible, the ability to know in detail the workings of karma, the ability to know the paths that lead to all the different destinations, the ability to know when meeting a person for the first time, to look into that person's mind and to see their past accumulations of the state of their faculties, their different tendencies to defilements, their potential strengths, and all such other matters like this. So this becomes a set of the 10 special powers of knowledge of the Buddhas. And then as time goes by, the text will ascribe to the Buddha from a somewhat later period the omniscient knowledge, the knowledge of everything that can be known. Okay, so one who tries to, and then this tendency goes on and on over time until in some of the Mahayana treatises, one finds such statements that every single hair pore in the body of the Buddha has omniscient knowledge. Okay, so this domain of the Buddhas, this is the first inconceivable matter. The second, it said the domain of one in jhana is inconceivable. And this, I have to say, I find somewhat puzzling, why the domain of one in jhana should be inconceivable. It would seem that even if one hasn't experienced jhana oneself, but one has done some samadhi meditation, and even without going into the jhanas, but if one can experience, even for a few moments, some peaceful unification of mind, some state of concentration in which it seems that the functions of thought have receded into the background and there has arisen feelings of joy and bliss, one can gain some sense of what the state of full absorption in jhana might be like. So I find this statement a bit puzzling. Okay, then the third inconceivable matter, and it's a compound that could be resolved in either of two ways. When I share the screen, I should have shared the entire screen. Let me go back. Stop the share and then share the entire screen. Am I still spotlighted?
You should be.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you are.
Okay. Okay, so this is a compound that can be resolved in either of two ways. I want to open. So the compound is kama vipaka. Yeah, it's kama vipako, which is said to be inconceivable and what should not be thought about. But now this is a compound that can be resolved in either of two ways. It could be taken as a what's called a dvanda compound, which means an addition compound, where you have karma and its result, or it can be taken as a tapurisa compound, that is the result of karma. So in either way, it's said to be an inconceivable matter. And we could see some ways in which it can be inconceivable if you try to figure out whether certain situations are due to karma. For example, okay, we have the coronavirus spreading around. Several people are in the same room together. And a week later, let's say there's 5 people in the room. A week later, 3 of them have gotten infected. 2 of them didn't get infected. None of them were wearing masks in the room. 3 got infected. 2 did not get infected. Then of the 3 that get infected, 1 of them dies. 1 of them gets so serious, they go to the hospital, but they recover and come out from the hospital. 1 of them just gets ill enough that they could stay at home and just rest at home, and then they recover. So you could raise the question, did the 3 who got infected get infected because of karma? Did the 1 die because of karma? One get hospitalized because of a lighter karma. One recover because fully by staying at home because there's still a lighter karma. Two who didn't get infected, they didn't have that negative karma, they had protective karma. So you could dwell on this, try to figure it out, ponder it, and you never come to a clear answer. Sometimes we read about, okay, an airplane collision, 220 people die. Did they all die because of karma? Did they have some collective karma that brought them together on this plane flight and they died together because of that collective karma? The plane crash takes place. Maybe one little child crawls out from the ruins of the plane crash. One child is a survivor. Did that child survive because they had some protective karma? And we could ponder this, reflect on it, discuss it, but we don't come to clear answers. And if you want to try to explain everything in terms of karma, then probably one would go mad. Okay, then the fourth inconceivable matter is said to be speculation about the world. In Pali, this is loka chinta. Yeah. And then the commentary explains that this is speculation about the earth, speculation about the ocean, how big is the earth, who created the earth, when did the earth come into existence, how long will the earth endure, how deep is the ocean, what kind of creatures are living in the ocean, and so forth and so on. So it's said that this speculation is an inconceivable matter, and if you try to figure it out, it will drive you mad, or you'll get frustrated. But actually, it seems that this could have been an inconceivable matter in the Buddha's time. But modern science has found out so much information about the world. I mean, this is quite incredible. It could tell us with a very high degree of precision that the Big Bang, which started this present cosmic cycle, took place 13 billion years ago. They can describe pretty much what took place in each split second after the Big Bang, up to the formation of subatomic particles and then atoms, and then the formation, how this original primordial mass of wildly flying about subatomic particles compressed into atoms, and the atoms formed into molecules, and then out of those molecules, the original stars started to form, and they could give us a very precise timeline about all of those events and tell us in detail how the sun took shape, took form, and how the planets emerged from the sun. And science can give us they can dissect or divide the stages in the development of the planet Earth into precise periods, telling us how many billion years this stage lasted when there was just the primordial soup with some very, very simple molecules floating in the soup, and those molecules joined together to form more complex molecules. Those more complex molecules started to reproduce and turned into maybe virus formations, and then at time bacteria emerged, and then out of the bacteria simpler organisms emerged, and so on. And so science can give us quite a lot of detailed information about the earth, about the oceans in the past and at the present, and even into the distant future. So, back in ancient India, this might have been inconceivable, but today we can have quite remarkably precise information about these stages in the development of the earth, the oceans, and so on. We'll go through these suttas and then we'll open up for discussion. So those are the 4 inconceivable matters. Okay, next is a sutta on the 4 purifications of offerings. And what is meant by the purifications of offerings? Yeah, this just refers to another sutta, is the way in which an offering, and this is, the sutta is expressed, what lies in the background, the context, is the offerings that lay people will make to monastics. And by the purification of an offering means the acquiring of merit or wholesome karma as a consequence, as a result of that offering. And so within the framework of Buddhist spirituality, or more broadly of ancient Indian spirituality, because throughout India, from ancient times even up to the present, the kind of premise that underlies all the different schools of Indian spirituality is that the renunciants, the sadhus, sannyasis, bhikshus, paribhajikas, renounce the household life, give up remunerative forms of work in order to live in total dependence on the offerings, the generosity of the householders. And householders support the monastics, the renunciants, by making offerings to them, usually the offerings of a dwelling place, robes, in the case of those ascetics who wear robes. Of course, there are the naked ascetics. They don't have to receive any kind of offerings of robes. Then offerings of food, then offerings of medicines in time of sickness, and nowadays offerings of other basic requisites of living a monastic life. And so the lay people make those offerings. Of course, it's an expression of their faith and devotion to those who are seeking enlightenment and liberation. And often they will support, in India and in other Asian countries, they'll support renunciants of any conviction and allegiance. So the Buddhists, say in India, will support renunciants with their basic requisites, whether they be Hindus, Jains, or followers of any other school. And when I was in India, I went on alms round, and Hindu lay people made offerings to me of the food. So they do this with the understanding that it's part of their obligation to support those who have left the worldly life to seek enlightenment and liberation. But there's also a little bit of an exchange agreement in the background, unspoken, tacit exchange agreement, that by making these offerings, the layperson acquires wholesome karma, which is also called merit. And that merit has the capacity to ripen and to bring results, the fruits of karma that are beneficial to the donor, to the one making the offering. And whenever one makes an offering, that act of giving in itself is inherently wholesome and therefore is productive of merit, but the power of the merit differs from case to case, and the difference in the power, the productive capacity of the merit, depends on certain other factors. And it is that power in the offering, that wholesome karma generated by the offering, that is called the purification of the offering. And so here the sutta speaks about four purifications of offerings. And first it lays out the outline of the sutta. So we have the offering that's purified through the donor, not through the recipients. The offering is purified through the recipients, but not through the donor. An offering that is not purified either through donor or recipients, and an offering that is purified through both the donor and the recipients. Okay, now comes the analysis or exposition. Okay, so how is the offering purified through the donor, but not through the recipients? So in this case, the donor is virtuous and of good character. So the donor will have good qualities. They will have true faith, saddha. They'll be observing precepts, so they'll have sila. They will have a mind of open-hearted generosity, eager to give and to help others. They might be possessed of such qualities as metta and karuna, loving kindness and compassion. They'll be patient, humble, reverential, respectful, and so forth. So the donor possesses these good qualities and good character, but the recipients are immoral and of bad character. So don't think that all monastics, all ascetics are necessarily virtuous people. It happens that people can become monastics, renunciates for various motivations, sometimes because they think to become a monastic, you have an easy way of life, you don't have to work, people will support you. Or you think, you see that monastics get venerated and honored, and you want to be honored, and so you become a monastic. You might think it's a good way to get an education. In some countries, monastics can go to college, to university, without having to pay any fees or tuition. And so you go to the university, get your degree, then you disrobe. Or it could happen that a person becomes ordained with good motivation originally, but then defilements start swelling up over time, and then the character gets corrupted, and then they start engaging in unwholesome deeds, but putting on a show of being virtuous and restrained. So the monk can be engaging in all sorts of unmonastic type behavior behind the screen, behind the curtain, but then when it comes time to go out on alms round, they'll walk very slowly, putting on a show of being absorbed in deep samadhi. Each step they seem to be taking very mindfully. When the layperson approaches to offer the food, they'll keep their eye cast down, and with a very, very deep intonation, they'll recite some verses of blessing. Sabityo vivajantu, sabarogo vinasatu, mate bhavantu antarayo, sukhi digayuko bhava. So then the lay people will go, sadhu, sadhu, our monk is such a holy person. Then the monk goes back to his room and then gets on the internet and starts engaging in all sorts of corrupt behavior again. Okay, so in this way, because the donor has a good character, virtuous, that good character of the dana purifies the offering. So the offering has meritorious power, wholesome power through the character of the dana, but not through the character of the recipient. Okay, in the second case, the donor is immoral and of bad character. So we might have somebody, let's say a businessman, who engages in all sorts of corrupt behavior to advance his business. He cheats, he drives his competitors out of business. You guys know how to engage in corrupt business practices better than I do. He might invest in unworthy causes to increase his holdings. He might lie to promote his product. If he sees that his product is even dangerous, toxic, he's selling some toxic materials, but he doesn't want to pay the fees and to lose the possibility of sales. And so he covers up the toxic qualities of his product. So in this way, he's immoral, of bad character, but because he's living maybe in a Buddhist country and he thinks, I have to maintain my reputation as being a virtuous person. And so he'll set up an offering to the monastery, even build, using some of his wealth to build a preaching hall for the monastery or to build a residence hall for the monks. So the donor is immoral, of bad character, but the recipients, the monks, are virtuous and of good character. So in this way, the offering becomes purified because of the character of the recipients, the monks, or could be the nuns, but not through the character of the dayaka, the donor. Okay, the third case, the offering is purified neither through the dana nor through the recipients. So the dana is of immoral, of bad character, and the recipients are immoral and of bad character. And so here we have to add a qualification that an act of giving is always meritorious. Or let us say, maybe I should also qualify that. Normally, let us say, we have the case where the dana is offering food to a group of corrupt monks. The dana is immoral, of bad character. The monks are immoral, of bad character. The dana is offering them food, or if they're sick, offering medicines, or he's building some cottage for the monks to live in, or giving them new robes. In this case, the act of giving is inherently virtuous. And so the act of giving will generate some merit, but the merit will not be very powerful. It will be rather weak merit because the dana is immoral and probably acquired his wealth through unscrupulous means, and the recipients are immoral and of bad character. So in that case, though the offering is not purified through either dana or recipients, but because it's an act of giving, let us say, with virtuous intent, to some extent, it's purified. I could think of some acts of giving which will not be purified at all. So somebody is in a state of depression, and this person, you want to get rid of him. Maybe he is competing, you're in love with a girl, and this person has been your rival, and the person is feeling rather miserable and upset and thinks, oh, this life is worthless, no point to continue on. Even if I were to win Mary's affection and marry her, I'd still be miserable. So then you go up to your rival and you say, yeah, this life is really worthless. Why don't you put an end to it? And you give him some poison and instruct him how to use it. Then I say, definitely, that is a gift that's not only not purified, but it's a gift since it's done with the intention of getting rid of your rival. It will generate powerful, potent, unwholesome karma, evil karma. Okay, then we have the fourth case. In this case, the offering is purified through both the donor and the recipients, because both are of virtuous and of good character. So this is the way this works out. This should be self-evident. Let's do all four suttas, then we can take, if questions come to mind, you can make a note of them, then we will take them at the end. Okay, then we come to the next sutta. This is called business. And this is another sutta where I have to raise, I'm sorry to say, Bhante Buddha. I have some skeptical doubts about this. Okay, so here Sariputta comes to the Buddha and asks why for one person a business undertakes in failure. Okay, why for another person the same kind of business, it succeeds to some extent, but doesn't fulfill his expectations. Okay, why is it for still another person the same business will succeed and fulfill his expectations, and for a fourth person, the business surpasses his expectations? Okay, so if we were to answer this question or ask this question today, and to a successful businessman, we would get reasonable, down-to-earth explanations. Probably we have on this line right now, on this call, some business people or teachers of business management who would be able to give us some clear expectations why a business will fail, another business will succeed, other businesses succeed even more, and other businesses will succeed wildly. Why did Apple run away? It just began in a garage with a couple of guys with some knowledge of technology, constructing some homemade desktops and computers. Now the most powerful corporation, one of the most powerful corporations in the world. Walmart, why is Walmart so successful? Why is, let's say, what is the leading automobile corporation now? Toyota? Why is that corporation so successful? Some other automobile corporations started, collapsed. I remember years ago when we started using computers in Sri Lanka, we were using, I think it was called NEC computer. Now you never hear of the NEC Corporation. And the software program we were using, at that time there were 3 word processing programs floating around. Microsoft Word, another one called Word Perfect, another one called WordStar. How many people nowadays are using WordStar? Anybody online still using WordStar? How many people using WordPerfect? I think nobody. Everybody is using Microsoft Word. Okay, so but let's get the Dharma explanation why businesses succeed and fail. Okay, so the Buddha says somebody approaches an ascetic or Brahmin and invites him to ask what he needs. You need a new building, just let me know. You need some medicines, let me know. You need some vitamins, please tell me. You need a new robe, let me know and I'll give it. So he invites, but then the ascetic or Brahmin says, I need this, I need that. But the person who offers, the businessman who offers, doesn't give what was requested. So when he passes away and comes back to this world, he grows up, becomes an adult, maybe studies business management in school, starts a business. The business takes off for a few months, a year or so, then it collapses and ends in failure. So what was the underlying reason for the failure? The person who offered the ascetic some gifts didn't fulfill his promise. So that's the reason for failure. Somebody else approaches and makes the same offer, and he'll give what was asked for, but doesn't fulfill the expectations. So the ascetic says, I need a new robe. And so the layperson will maybe offer a worn out, used robe. The ascetic says, the monk says, I need some multivitamins, some special vitamin C, and some vitamin D. And then the Dana might give the bottle of multivitamins, but doesn't give the vitamin C and vitamin D. We need a new dwelling place at this temple. And so maybe the Dayaka will start to build a new cottage, but doesn't fully equip it with the equipment it needs. He'll just put up the basic structure, no furniture. The plumbing in the toilet is not adequate, and so on. Okay, so then when he comes back to this world, he starts a business, and the business, it will function, it will operate, but doesn't measure up to his expectations. Okay, the third case, the Dana will fulfill the expectations. And so when he passes away, if he comes back to this world, starts a business, then the business will fulfill his expectations. He wants the business to be successful. It'll be not only successful, but so successful that he starts the business maybe in New York City, maybe in Manhattan. Then he has enough to start a branch in Brooklyn, another branch in Queens. Or if he starts in New York City, he could start another branch maybe in Boston and Philadelphia and Newark, New Jersey. So he could start several branches. So it fulfills his expectations. Okay, so in the fourth case, the person comes to the ascetic and invites him to ask what he needs. The person says, the ascetic, the monk says, okay, I need some multivitamins and some vitamin C and some vitamin D. So then the Dana will give not only the 3 bottles of vitamins, but he'll give maybe some packets of trail mix and some packets of biscuits and some kind of a powder that one mixes with one's tea to make oneself stronger, like some sustaining power, like Nestamol or milk powder. If the monk asks for a new robe, the donor will give 3 robes of the finest quality. If the monk says we need a new cottage at the temple, the donor will build a cottage, equip it with all of the equipment needed, make the finest furnishings, provide computer, telephone, all of these extra appurtenances he'll provide to the cottage. And so when he passes away, if he comes back as a human being and starts a business, his business surpasses his expectations. So he starts a computer company with a few models of homemade computers, and before long he has his Macs are selling all over the world, and he's starting iPhones and iPads and all other things. His automobile factory now has branches all over the major countries of the world. Super successful millionaire, billionaire. So that will be the karmic explanation according to the sutta. Okay, now we come to the 4th sutta, and please don't get angry when I go through the sutta and leave the call. We can discuss it during the question period. Okay, here the Venerable Ananda comes to the Buddha and says to him, why is it that women do not sit in council? In other words, they don't sit as judges on tribunals or engage in business or go to Cambodia. Okay, the Cambodia is a region to the northwest, the northwest region, northwest of India. Maybe it would correspond now to parts of Pakistan, Afghanistan, quite remote region. So why is that women do not engage in these activities? Then the answer given by the sutta, women are prone to anger, women are envious, women are miserly, women are unwise. So those are the 4 things that put the sutta in the book of 4s. Anger, envy, miserliness, and lack of wisdom. And now I have to say that sometimes one has to disagree with suttas. And I should also add that it's with the Anguttara Nikaya, and also to some extent with the Samyutta Nikaya, because these 2 collections consist of many, many short suttas, it would have been very easy for the monks of a somewhat later period to insert suttas into the collections, suttas that will reinforce their own particular biases. And my suspicion is that the sutta about success in business belongs to that category, which is not to say that one shouldn't be, that a business person who makes an offering to a monastic shouldn't give and give generously. But whether that provides it's very, very doubtful to me that this provides a satisfactory explanation of why there is a difference in the degrees of success of business people. But you could see that there might have been an ulterior motive for monks to to compose a sutta like this and insert it into the collection, since it would give encouragement to lay people, particularly wealthy lay people, to offer the monastics the items they need and want to an extent that surpasses their expectations. And you could see a sutta like this could have been inserted by monks who had the misogynist disposition, misogynist views. Since it said, okay, maybe some of this would be true in ancient India. Women do not sit in council and judgment, but now we have women sitting on the courts, even the Supreme Court. And I have to mention very sadly, the passing away last night of of the Supreme Court Justice Ruth Ginsburg. But on the Supreme Court, we had 3 women justices who had extremely successful careers as judges to get on the Supreme Court. And many, many judges and lawyers today are women. We have women who have been heads of government, maybe not yet in the United States, but Germany has Angela Merkel. India had Indira Gandhi. Sri Lanka, at the time I was in Sri Lanka, we had at the same time a woman president, Chandrika Kumaratunga, and her mother was the prime minister, Serimau Bandaranaike. And even in Great Britain, there was Margaret Thatcher. And more recently, Theresa May. Okay, so women have played prominent roles in government and on the courts. Women engage in business and become very, very successful businesswomen. Nowadays, probably many business executives are women. And as for traveling to Cambodia, I mean, one could see this, that Cambodia was quite a remote region. And so for a woman to travel to Cambodia, unless she was accompanied by males, could have been quite dangerous. And in any case, I don't see why qualities like anger, envy, miserliness, or lack of wisdom would have been obstacles to traveling to this remote region. And as far as the idea that women are more prone to anger, envy, miserliness, and lack of wisdom than men, again, this is something I have to disagree with. In my understanding, you can't determine just on the basis of gender whether a person will have more or less anger, envy, miserliness, or wisdom. That depends. There's just no relation at all that I can see between gender and those qualities. Okay, I think we should take questions and comments now. And don't feel shy if you disagree with me or you disagree with these suttas. Don't feel hesitant to speak up. Okay, we begin with Olivia. You can unmute yourself.
Hello, Bhante. I'm going to start with the last one.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to wipe it aside in the sense that I do believe that it totally contradicts the Buddha's teaching on cause and effect.
Yeah.
So everyone can respond based on causes, effect, and conditionality. And so I just find that some of these things, having grown up in India, it's a little offhand, and one needs to just ignore it more than worry about it or get too emotional about it. But in regards to the other suttas that we covered today, I'd like to do a little exposition of my own mind as to how it works when I read these or listen to these suttas. And it's the principle of cause and effect and conditionality that really attracted me to Buddhism.
Yeah.
And the fact that conditionality is mainly in a state of flux this causes further complications of, it further complicates an event and the outcomes. So I feel instead of getting caught up in the outcomes, it's just better to focus on what's coming our way, how we respond to it.
Yeah.
And also to keep in mind that this is not a clinical response, but it's more, some soft skills such as the Brahma Viharas in practice can also help.
Yeah.
And as opposed to eventually, instead of worrying about reaping the benefits or suffering, depending on how cause and effect plays out, these things would accumulate in the background anyway, unbeknownst to us, and that's how karma might work.
Yeah.
Is this way of thinking, does it align with what the Buddha is teaching, or is it something I concoct in my mind?
No, I quite agree with what you're saying. And this is the way I think about karma. From any event that happens, and I think that this is in agreement with the Buddha's teaching, we can't determine when something happens that this is happening necessarily as the result or ripening of karma. So I never try to think, reflecting from the present back to the past, was this due to some past good karma that I did? Is this misfortune the result of some bad karma that I did? Or in the case of other people, is this happening to them? People losing their homes in California in the forest fire, people in the South getting struck by these floods. Is this happening to them because of their bad karma? So I don't look at it reasoning from the things that happen in the present back to the past, but what I find to be the more skillful way is to use the principle of karma to determine what should I do in the present. So we understand the law of karma itself is that unwholesome deeds, when they ripen, will bring undesirable results. Wholesome deeds, when they ripen, will bring good or desirable results. So that should condition the way we act in the present, having confidence that this law of karma will operate and ensure that the deeds, the good and bad deeds that we do, will produce their results. But it doesn't mean that every event that's happening to us or to other people is happening through the ripening of karma. And maybe to use a simple analogy, let's say I'm walking down a street and I see that in front of a particular house, the sidewalk is wet. So I can't infer from the fact that the sidewalk is wet that it rained on that street, because it could be that the person was watering their lawn and the water from the hose came onto the sidewalk. Or it could be that there was a leak of a pipe underground and the water flowed out and wet the sidewalk. So I can't infer that a wet sidewalk means that it rained, but what I can infer is that if it rains, the sidewalk is going to get wet. So we could apply the same thing to our thinking about karma. Does that make sense?
It does, Bhikkhu Bodhi, and thank you, because I've been searing about this sometimes, and it just brings up a lot of agitation and frustration. So I thank you for the explanation, and thank you for reconfirming that at least I'm on the right track. Thank you.
Okay, now Vinyu.
Good morning.
Morning.
I have one question regarding the domain of the Buddha, which you refer to the Samyutta Nikaya, chapter 47. My question is that Buddha has the 10 qualities, and normally a lot of suttas, like for example, in the Book of Four in Anguttara Nikaya 41, Sutta 41, it mentions about vision, knowledge and vision. So I get confused. What exactly is this vision of the Buddha? Is it included in the knowledge, or is something else the vision?
Vision, when the expression is used, knowledge and vision, usually the two are indicating pretty much the same thing. It's just that the word vision emphasizes that this is, I call this a direct personal knowledge, something that he could see for himself, not just a conceptual or intellectual knowledge.
Okay.
Oh, I see.
And
In the context of Sutta number 41.
yes, in the context of the concentration, it said the development of concentration that leads to obtaining knowledge and vision.
Oh, that is referring to the development of the divine eye. That is the
Okay,
ability to
right.
see things that lie beyond the scope of the normal vision.
Okay, right. Thank
Okay,
you.
Marcel.
That's-
Thank you, Bhante. So, given that there could possibly be extra addition of other people's own views or agenda to the text or to the Pali text, so it seems like on some occasion, it could be difficult to differentiate the actual words of the Buddha with the sneaky addition of these people. So my question is, are there any guidances that we can follow to more confidently determine or decide whether the text is the word of the Buddha or not?
I say that there are not absolute guidelines, but what I would say first, maybe two ways one could go about determining at least what comes from the very early sources. One requires a particular specialized knowledge, and that is the ability to compare. There are different recensions of the early Buddhist texts that have come down in different lines of transmission from different schools of early Buddhism. And so we have texts coming from, in the Chinese agamas, we have counterparts to the Digha Nikaya, Majjhima Nikaya, Samyutta Nikaya, and Anguttara Nikaya, which are not all arranged in the same way that the Pali Nikayas are arranged. But by comparing, and then there are independent translations into Chinese that are still preserved in the Chinese Tripitaka. Then there are some texts that have been preserved in Tibetan translation, texts that have been discovered in coming from Gandhara, which is now corresponds to Afghanistan, coming from another early Buddhist school, texts in Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit that have been preserved. And so by comparing these, when we find texts that are common to several schools, that gives us some confidence that these texts go back to a period before the schools divided, not necessarily back to the Buddha himself, but in this way, by comparing schools that divided from increasingly earlier and earlier periods, we could get some idea of what texts were common to both of these schools would have preceded the division of those schools. And then also when there are common texts, we still find differences between them, which also shows us that at a certain point, the compilers either introduced differences or errors arose in the process of transmission. But that is a method that could be used for scholars, by scholars with a specialized knowledge of these texts. For us, if we're just reading the translations of the Nikayas into English, what I say is to focus on the texts that represent the primary, essential, core teachings of the Buddha. So those would be the teachings on such matters as the Four Noble Truths, dependent origination, the different sets amongst the 37 constituents of enlightenment or aids to enlightenment, many of the teachings on the workings of karma and its result, the teachings on basic ethics, the teachings on the sequential training of monastics. So those will show us the essence of the Dhamma. And then when we find some texts here and there that seem to depart from the spirit of the teaching, then we can raise some suspicion about those texts. Okay, so those are some guidelines we can follow. Okay, J. Leon. Leon. You unmute yourself. Okay, I'll jump to Kenneth. Kenneth the Abru. Unmute yourself.
Unmuted now, J. Leon.
Okay. Okay, go on.
Bhante, thank you. I agree with you. For myself, I try to stick only to the core teachings and receive great satisfaction from that. But I am also concerned when I hear often references to the seemingly Buddha's doubt of the equal worth of women, especially not wanting to ordain them originally as monks. My understanding from the suttas, Ananda had to sort of twist his arm to do it.
Yeah.
And even when they were first ordained, there are the special rules added for women, and that today prevents women from being fully ordained in the Theravada tradition.
Well, actually now the full ordination for women has been restored into the Theravada tradition by taking advantage of an allowance that the Buddha made at the very beginning of the order of nuns, the Bhikkhuni Sangha, when he said that at that time there were no nuns to perform the ordination. So the Buddha said, I allow the monks to ordain women as nuns, as bhikkhunis. Okay, and so after the bhikkhuni order came into existence and was flourishing, then the bhikkhunis became participants or partners in the ordination procedure. And then after the bhikkhuni order died out sometime in Sri Lanka, maybe the 11th century, for centuries there was no ordination of women, and women apparently didn't press for the ordination. But late in the 20th century, women began to demand, why can't we be ordained too? And then at least some of the liberal thinking monks found that they could go back to that original permission the Buddha gave to the early generation of monks to ordain women as bhikkhunis. And then they started to ordain women as bhikkhunis. And now there are, at least in Sri Lanka, there's probably more than 1,000 women ordained as bhikkhunis. And here in the United States and in some European countries, women are ordained as bhikkhunis.
But I guess it still reflects to me these special rules and
yeah, there would have been reasons for those.
Buddha himself had.
Yeah, there would have been special reasons for those. There would have been reasons for those special rules that I don't have the time to go into that right now. And there have been.
Thank you, Bhante. Thank you.
Okay, we have to take just quick questions because time is running out. So Kenneth?
Yes, Bhante.
Okay.
Bhante, I was wondering about the the sutra, the Cambodia Sutra.
Yeah.
I was wondering, Bhante, because the title of the sutra says Cambodia, and you were referring to that region as the northwest part of India, which is currently probably the region of Pakistan and Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So at least in the Western world, the way that region is described as, like a very difficult place for women's rights. So I don't know whether there's a connection to the geography that long ago. I was just wondering about that.
Yeah, this I don't know.
No. Thank you, Bhante.
It seems to be referring to traveling to Cambodia, not living there.
Oh, I see. I was just wondering, Bhante. Thank you.
Okay, Helena? Okay. Helena, you could ask your question. Okay, I'm not getting anything. Okay, Savan Kumar.
Hello, Bante.
Okay.
Thank you very much for this talk. I have a question regarding the domain of jhana.
Yeah.
So in several suttas, there is a detailed explanation of the factors of each jhana.
Yeah.
And it is like it is encouraged to experience those things. I feel so.
Yeah.
Then what this is referring to, like here is it saying that we should not think about jhana, or
I don't think it doesn't mean that one shouldn't think about jhana. One shouldn't try to figure out, I guess, what the domain of jhana is. In other words, trying to figure out intellectually what a person in jhana is experiencing. That's the only way I could understand this. Okay, I have to move quickly because time is running. So, Heinz Dieter.
Yeah, hi, Bante, thank you for your teaching. I find the emphasis on the inconceivable very important. We live in such an intellectual culture that emphasizes figuring things out intellectually. I wonder though, when we compare the Sutta Pitaka to the Abhidhamma Pitaka, in the Sutta form of presentation, it's a mosaic where there's not a comprehensive sutta that explains everything.
Yeah.
We have to infer from the different pieces something that is being pointed to but never fully expressed abstractly. Whereas in the Abhidhamma Pitaka, the effort seems to be more of an intellectualist, abstract conceiving of the whole. Would you agree that there's a danger in conceiving the inconceivable?
You mean in the Abhidhamma? I wouldn't say that the danger in the Abhidhamma is trying to conceive the inconceivable, but there's a danger that if you master this very complex, systematic mass of information, of knowledge, that you become satisfied with that and sort of swollen with conceit, thinking that you've understood the Dhamma because you've learned these lists of categories and relations and factors in the Abhidhamma. That is the real danger there.
Thank you.
Okay, Henry.
Good afternoon, Bande. On the sutta on offerings, in today's society, in the past, used to be from the donor to the recipient, but in today's society, many times it is from the donor to a religious organization or to a foundation.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes the foundation or members of the organization misappropriate or misuse some of these offerings.
Yeah.
How does it work out in that regards?
Of course, it would be unethical for an organization to misuse the funds that are given to that organization. But how this works karmically in terms of this purification of offerings, that it doesn't seem to be so directly relevant.
Okay, so as long as the donor's intentions are purified, that should be okay, I suppose.
Yeah, though I would say that the dana should also investigate the organization to which they want to make the contribution, to ensure that at least if they have a reasonable ground for inferring that the organization has good standing, that they're using the funds in a responsible way.
Okay, thank you, Bante.
What they never know for certain, or it's very difficult to know with absolute certainty. But maybe that's the reason why there are some websites like Charity Watch, GuideStar, which provide guidance when one wants to make a gift to, especially to major charities. They will rate that charity in terms of its integrity, success, and so forth.
Okay.
Okay, we'll have to take the last question here.
Thank you, Bante.
This will be Lim Kim Hung.
Yeah, morning, Bante.
Morning.
Yeah, it's regarding the Anguttara, the number 79, 4.79. on the business, whether it's failure or fulfill. So that one, it said that it depends on what he had done to fulfill the ascetic or Brahmin in the previous life. But the thing is, not all businessmen that they do, they may have not met any ascetic or Brahmin.
Yeah, I mean, that's very true. In fact, it pretty much presupposes the situation in ancient India in the Buddha's time, and a tradition which might continue in the Buddhist countries today, but you wouldn't find this outside the Buddhist world.
Yes, that's all, just only to comment.
Okay, we'll have to end now, and I'm just going to do a quick sharing of the merits because it's getting a little late for my lunch. So I'll just recite quickly the sharing of the merits. And you just, in your minds, you share the merits with the devas, the bhutas, the fair spirits, and so on. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahedika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu sasanang. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahedika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanang. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahedika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu mang parang etavatacha mehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe deva namodantu sabbe bhuta namodantu sabbe satanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya bhavagupadaya vichihetato etantare satakayupapanna rupya rupicha sanya sanyino tukha pamuchantu Pusantu Nibuting. Okay, so thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bhante Bodhi.
Thank you, Bhante. Good
Bye.
afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy the lunch. Enjoy the lunch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Be safe.
Have a nice day. Enjoy.
Thank you,
Wonderful.
Bhante.
Okay, I'm going to end now.
Thank you for sharing the Reverend Nyana Deepa's Facebook.
Okay, you can look at that. Look at that.
Yeah. And immediately going. Thank you, Bhante. Bye.
Thank you, Bhante. Bye. Thank you, Bhante. Thank you, Mir.
Okay.